And good evening, good morning, and good afternoon to our loyal listeners out there, wherever you may be on this rotating globe. We sometimes refer to as Mother Earth. Mother Earth will be part of the discussion tonight because these ET experiments may be tapping into the Earth's aura, otherwise known as the Schumann resonance. And we'll get to that a bit later. First, I got a few shout-outs, and the first one goes to, my name is Jonathan Womack. For those who are not familiar with me, Richard is out tonight, and I want to send a shout-out to him. He's in New Mexico. They have these wildfires going on, and the valley where he lives is full of smoke and other unhealthy particulates, so his voice it's not so good. He's having a tough time, so I'm going to fill in for him tonight, and hopefully he'll be back tomorrow or at the worst next weekend. And I also want to send a shout out to our friend and colleague, Georgia Lambert. She's a regular on the show. Wonderful lady. We love her dearly. Today's her birthday, so happy birthday, Georgia. And good health and wellness to you. And thirdly, I want to send out a private shout out to my mother. Her birthday was about 10 days ago. She turned 90, and we had a big party 2 weeks ago at the local church, and it was like 75 people, and it was really fun and cool. But she was hoarse afterwards, and the next day she couldn't talk, and now 2 weeks later she hasn't got her voice back. So let's send her a get well wish, and hopefully she will get better. So tonight, my guests are Maria Wheately, David Sarita, Thomas Mathers, and we're going to continue our analysis of these ET receptions that we've been getting since December. So for those of you who are new, we sent a signal out to Oumuamua, an encoded message. We got some crazy message back. And we've been repeating this, sending the signals from Stonehenge, courtesy of Maria Wheately. And that's what we'll be reviewing tonight, is that not only her hour and 20-minute recording, but also the recordings of a few other people, Richard, our friend Ralph, and another person who I don't know, his name is Paul, who went out in the woods and meditated and recorded the message. So that was pretty cool. That's tonight's show, and I'd like to first bring on Maria and have her talk about her plans to go to the King's Chamber at the Great Pyramid and send our encoded message and record any signals that she got back and what happened, and circumstances changed all that, and Richard suggested a backup plan, and on and on. So Maria will share all that. And the way to get to the show page is to visit our website online, www.theothersideofmidnight.com. And you'll see a banner for tonight's show, Maria's Continuing Adventures in ET Communications. You can click on that, and it takes you to tonight's show page. And there you will find the various bios and items that we'll be discussing tonight. Now, for folks, I'm not sure if we're going to have callers tonight during the last half hour, but let's throw it out there. The number to call, 917-889-8802, if you have a question or a comment you'd like to add. That's 917-889-8802, and that's the last half hour of the show. So let's get started. I'm going to read a bit about Maria here. She's quite an interesting soul. She's a second-generation dowser who was taught by European master dowsers, her late father, and Chinese geomants. She is a leading authority on geodetic earth energies, ley lines, and stone circles. Maria is an accomplished author of books on sacred sites and dowsing. And moving down to the end of her bio there, it says Maria teaches advanced dowsing techniques which are not taught anywhere else in the world. And you can read her full bio there on the show page. So without further ado, welcome back to the show, Maria. How are you?
Yes, I'm very well. Thank you, Jonathan.
Now, tell us about your plans to travel to Egypt with your friend Brian Forster, and then you decided to do this side trip to the King's Chamber that coincides with our ET communication research. So what is the deal?
Well, I was due to fly out to Cairo to join Brian Forster and Patricia Ariane on a tour that was going to be from the 18th of March, which happened to coincide with my full moon birthday. And we were going to be traveling around all the sites of ancient Egypt until the 1st of April. And I was thoroughly looking forward to going to Egypt, as I always do. But a few days before departure, unfortunately, I tested positive for COVID and came down with COVID-like symptoms, which came on quite fast. Just a few hours after texting Patricia Ariane, the main organizer of the trip, she too came down with COVID. And the following day, Brian Forster contacted me and he tested positive for COVID. So there was no way I was going to be able to join the tour, and nobody really could join the tour due to COVID. I've never been on a tour before where all of the tour leaders become ill, so it was quite something. So the trip, as far as I was concerned, and Brian and Patricia, was a no-go.
Yeah, what are the odds of that happening? They're fairly astronomical. So your feeling was that this was a good thing, and you mentioned that you had some sort of, I don't want to say apparition, but you felt like maybe you received a kind of paranormal warning from your father. Is that true?
That's right. I was having paranormal activity in my house for quite some time. Communication mainly through my lights. I have, side lamps like we all do, and fairy lights in my home as well. And each time I was talking either on the phone or even text on my phone about Egypt, the lights kept flashing on and off quite dramatically. So I felt that something was, going to be amiss, as it were. I didn't think it would be my own health at all. But yes, it was very strange, and the tour was saved by a lady. They had to fly in from America who took over the entire tour, and they've never in their experience known all of the tour leaders to go down. So something very strange was happening, in the ethers, as it were.
Wow, that is strange. And I also want to mention that Cynthia is with us tonight in the background. And if you want to jump in, Cynthia, feel free to do that. Because I really miss having you around on the show. So now, what were you expecting if you did make it to the King's Chamber? Did you have expectations in regards to sending and receiving radio signals?
Yes, I mean, that was going to be, for me, one of the highlights of the trip, not only just being in the King's Chamber, which is always a highlight by itself, and the Queen's Chamber and the subterranean chamber as well, within the Great Pyramid of Giza, but to communicate through what we have been doing from the King's Chamber. It would have been quite profound, I felt, quite a special transmission, because David, as we know, has been doing calculations regarding these transmissions, and the pyramid encodement has featured greatly. So I felt that whatever the transmissions were telling us or guiding us in some way or some manner, it would have been greatly received from one of the most iconic places on the planet.
Yeah, it would have been an unprecedented experiment because nobody's ever done this, right?
Exactly. It would have been something, quite great in its own worth and merit.
Yeah, and toward the end of the show, I'd like to talk about where you folks think we should go next, and I have some input on that as well. So now, once the mission, the travel to Egypt was canceled, I guess Richard came up with a backup plan. Is that right?
That's right. I mean, I did become, quite ill initially with COVID, and I do have, unfortunately, a blood disorder, which means I run a risk of having a stroke at any time, let alone
Oh.
without. It's Leiden factor 5 I suffer from. So when I did become quite ill, I was hospitalized for a couple of days to maintain oxygen levels within my blood system. And again, quite strangely, Patricia Ariane was admitted to hospital, and she too was on oxygen as well. And what's the chances of that occurring? But afterwards, I soon started to pick up and regain some degree of health back, thank the gods of that. And so, so I became quite a lot better. And then Richard and I communicated and decided to carry on, because it's a spring equinox, and like we've been discussing previously, through the eightfold year of the ancient Celtic calendar, these are the days when the veil, which is already thinning, becomes its thinnest on these gateway portal days. So that was a date we decided to go ahead with.
Can I stop you there?
Sure.
Eightfold. I know about the two equinoxes and the two solstices. Are you saying there are 4 other dates that have significance in, solar alignments and this kind of thing, or?
Yes. To the Druid and Wiccan community, and indeed to the Neolithic, going back 5,000 years, there were 8 days of significance. We have the equinoxes of the spring and autumn. We have the solstices of the summer and winter. They are called the cross days, and they create in the zodiac a cross. And then in between those days, you have the cross quarter days of May the 1st, Beltane, and then Lammas, the 1st of August, the start of the Celtic year, which is Samhain, which is November the 1st, and it's Eve. New Year's Eve is celebrated on Halloween, and which was Christianized to Halloween. And then we have the 1st of February, which is Imbolc. And those 8 days have always been celebrated. And even if you go back to 5,000 years ago in the Neolithic period of our long history on the British Isles, then you have monuments aligned to that sunrise or to that sunset. So they were very, very sacred days for our ancestors old.
My goodness. Yeah, see, I always imagine if I'm above the sun looking down on the solar system and I see the Earth circling the sun, like the 12 o'clock position, the 3 o'clock, 6 o'clock, the 9 o'clock position. Those are when you have these alignments. So there's actually 8 altogether. I didn't know that. I have to adjust my model now. That's cool.
We call it the wheel of the year, and it's the cycle of time. And to the ancients, there were very special days. For example, a lot of people confuse the summer solstice to Midsummer's Day. They're two separate events. The summer solstice is roughly around the 21st of June, but 3 days later, the sun starts to sink a little bit lower. That's Midsummer's Day. And Midsummer's Eve is a point where the thin is at its most thinnest. The veil is at its most thinnest, rather. And that's a very sacred day. So you have a few little days in between the eightfold year, but they're very sacred times.
Yeah, that's cool because that all fits in with Richard's hyperdimensional physics, that the rotation of the planets around the sun is affecting the torsion field, which affects all of us on Earth. And it's a very mechanical thing and scientific thing. It's not anything bizarre or, astrology. There's really something to it. And so Richard's idea was for you to grit your teeth, get out of bed, and go down to Stonehenge on the equinox and salvage the experiment. Since you wouldn't be going to Egypt, he asked you to go to Stonehenge and send the signal. Is that right?
That's right. So we decided that we would go to Stonehenge, which is always a pleasure and a grace anyway. I mean, it's a wonderful, wonderful landscape. And I have been there, I don't know how many times, hundreds of times. But each time I go, it has its own signature, its own energy on a particular day. So it's always a pleasure. Although getting out of bed at 4 o'clock in the morning when you're not feeling too good was something. But yes, it was a very still day here in the UK in the wonderful kingdom of Wessex. So it was very still, and there was something it felt quite a special day. It's a special day anyway, but there was something in the background that was telling me it's going to be a special day. So it was a pleasure going to the Salisbury Plain.
So you go down there, the sun's not up yet, it's dark, you're there, are you by yourself, you have a companion, and you send the signal, which is an encoded message, and the message it's nothing really mysterious, it's just encoded with common mathematics and tones and Morse code and things that we believe an ET civilization would recognize as an intelligent message. So you send our little encoded message out from your radio on 432 megahertz channel, and then you set the recorder to catch anything that might come back. And did you indeed receive a signal back?
Well, I started off by a place called Winterbourne Stoke Roundabout, which is an ancient burial ground.
Is this your items?
No.
Okay.
No, but that's where I started from, which is very close to Stonehenge, but is it's about 6,000-year-old long barrow there with very, very unique barrows. It's one of the finest in Wessex, actually. And Wessex is a mighty area. We call it Wessex because it spans a few counties, what you would call states, and it's very ancient. It goes back to the time of the Saxons, King Alfred the Great, and he got all the counties together, and we call it Wessex. And so Wessex is the motherland of all the sites of Stonehenge, Avebury, and Cranbourne Chase. You have the magnificent burials of the Bronze Age in Wessex itself. And that particular burial ground has many diverse types of barrows. You have a long barrow, a disc barrow, a round barrow. It's magnificent. It was very dark there to begin with. And then I moved on to Stonehenge itself. And because it's the equinox, you have a lot of people around as well. So there were people that were celebrating the equinox outside of Stonehenge itself as well. So it had a kind of merry feel about it.
Yeah, there must have been some excitement in the air. And then you send the recording before the sun rises above the horizon. Is that right?
That's right. And like I said, there was something very special about that day. It was still, like on one of those mornings where we say in the UK, I'm sure you have the same saying in the United States, you feel like a pin can drop. There's something very still in the background. And the weather was very still. And there was hardly any wind. And bearing in mind, all the other transmissions have been done in like gale force, very strange weather conditions. This was so clement and so still. It was very beautiful. And when the sun came up, it looked magnificent.
Oh man, I wish we had some video or a picture. I'd love to see that. And I remember on February 4th when you went there, the weather was slashing rain and wind, and you're out there in this hail, and it's a bit crazy.
Yes.
And then you go on the equinox, and it's the exact opposite.
Yeah, exactly. Both of them are these very sacred days. We started off on Imbolc proper, which is when the sun in the position of the astrological zodiac is exactly 15 degrees Aquarius. That's Imbolc, dedicated to the goddess Breed over here, quite often Christianized to Bridget. So that's one of those portal days. And then the spring equinox follows that. And yes, the weather was much kinder. I can remember being at Stonehenge on Imbolc for Richard, and I actually couldn't feel my fingers holding the radio, and thinking, "Oh my goodness, I want to get into the warm."
Yeah, crawl back into bed. That's for sure. Now, I want people to understand that this is an experiment that's never been done before, and the results are something that's never been heard before either, because I believe that what we are hearing in the reception that you recorded is the ringing of these stones, and that the various stones ring at different frequencies. There's some that are ringing right around 432 hertz, and then others ring higher. There's a couple of times during this 1 hour and 21 minute recording where it sounds like all of the stones are singing, but all throughout the 1 hour and 20 minutes, these tones come and go where you get this woo, 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 kind of thing where you can hear the stones ringing. And to my knowledge, this has never been done before, and no one, I would say no one on Earth today has ever heard the stones ringing in this way. So when I heard your recording, Maria, I was like, whoa! And in one of my items, in fact, I put a picture of an Indian singing bowl because it reminded me of someone taking that wooden handle and they run it around the edge of the singing bowl, and the bowl vibrates and makes this wonderful sound. And it just sounded like Maria took this wooden handle and she's ringing it around Stonehenge, right around the rocks, and it's vibrating just like the bowl, and it's making this sound. And that's the impression I got when I first looked at your recording. But you probably didn't hear that when you're recording. Were you listening to it as it's recording, or did you hear any of that during the experiment?
That's absolutely phenomenal what you're saying. I mean, this is a world first. I mean, most people that go to Stonehenge see the stones. They didn't hear the stones. So
Correct.
that's very, very remarkable. And I've only ever heard the stones at Avebury Ring once, which I'll describe later. But for me, listening to the radio and the recordings, I didn't hear anything ringing. The one of the radios was kind of going quite wild at one point, and I was thinking, what's going on there? And obviously, I wait to hear, the experts like yourself and Thomas and David, interpret that which has been recorded. So for me, I was thinking something is happening, but I had no idea that the stones, as you describe, were chiming, as it were. That's incredible.
Well, it makes me wonder because you say there's a ley line that connects the Great Pyramid with Stonehenge. They lie on this. And I had to wonder if the pyramid, the Great Pyramid, as well as any other, I don't know if the Kaaba is on that line or not, but I imagine any sacred site that is on that line was probably ringing like the Stonehenge was. Do you think there could be something to that?
I think so, because if we imagine the ley network is a connective system from one site to another, and energy travels very fast along a straight line, which has been known since the ancient Chinese geomants recorded such in their writings. So yes, I think there's that connection, and we often think of we think of the physical connection between places like Stonehenge and Egypt, but now we're thinking about it in terms of sound. The monuments almost like speaking to one another, transmitting sound to one another is another new dynamic that brings the monuments alive.
Yeah, and it fits in with my research of Arches National Park and Delicate Arch, where it appears to me that the arch or the portal and the solar alignments and these acoustical amphitheaters that are tangent to the arch and a reflection pool. So you have all these elements. You've got sound. I'm calling it photonic acoustics, for lack of a better term, because it seems that the sound and the sun, prana or whatever you want to call it, the sound and the sun and the water. There's a movie called The Secret Life of Water. I want to see that movie because I think there's something with the water going on too at Delicate Arch. And all of these things together activated the arch. And where I'd like to go next is to have someone go to Delicate Arch on the summer solstice and send our encoded message into the arch, and maybe sing too, because I think people should sing into the arch. Nobody sings on these tourist videos you see on YouTube. They go to the arches and it's like you, Maria, they go in the morning and they watch the sun come up in the arch and it's beautiful, but nobody is singing, and we need some people to go to the arch and send our signal in there, and I think we'll get something back very profound. But
yes, and I also feel that, the long-skulled people that were, worshipping and using and utilizing Stonehenge could hear on many different levels, more so than ourselves. And there's myths about Stonehenge. You're talking about singing, Jonathan. They're called the perpetual choirs. And it was recorded in the Welsh triads. That's a kind of ancient Celtic chronicle, that there were people singing at Stonehenge 24 hours a day. They were the perpetual choirs. So I think there is something to do with singing. And a lot of the groups that I take in do love chanting and reflecting on those perpetual choirs that was recorded and part of our ancient holy history.
Wow, I've never heard of that. Let's pick up on that when we come back from the break. You're listening to The Other Side of Midnight. I'm Jonathan Womack, your host. Don't touch that dial. We will be right back. Okay, and we are back. I'm here with Maria Wheately. We're discussing Stonehenge and its resonance. And I'd like to share a story that's related to what Maria said just before the break there, which just kind of blew my mind a little bit. I've just had this image of people singing into the arches in Arches Park out in Utah. And I watch a lot of the tourist videos on YouTube, and this one travel guy has a bunch of followers. He goes to the parks and films it and walks around. So he's at this one area that nobody ever goes. There's many areas that people just don't even go. They don't have names or anything, and I'm finding all these temples, and it's ridiculous. But so he's standing near this small arch, and an arch is identified by being at least 1 meter. Any arch that's 1 meter or larger qualifies as an arch, and there's some 2,000 arches in Arches Park. So he comes up to this 3-foot wide arch. It's small. It's just on the ground, and he can stand on top of it. So he kind of steps up on it, and he's talking, and then he stops and he goes, "What was that?" And he goes, Echo. Dude, did you guys hear that? I've never heard that before. What is that? And, I'm sitting in my chair yelling at the screen, going, "Dude, sing into it. Come on." Of course, he can't hear me, so he just kind of goes, "Wow, that is really strange." And he goes on and continues his travel video. But that's the closest I've come to anyone actually realizing that these portals are special, and if you sing or talking to them. So right before the break, Maria, you were talking about, can you just repeat what you were saying? Because I kind of swallowed hard when you said that, these perpetual choirs. Can you talk more about that?
Yes, in what's called the Welsh Triads, they're kind of chronicles of ancient times that were recording of our past history. There were 3 perpetual choirs. One was in Stonehenge, one was at a place called Glastonbury, which is a very sacred place, and the other one was near Llanwit Major in Wales. And it was Io Magonwi, he was translating these triads of Britain, and it was stated that in each of these 3 choirs there were 24,000 saints. That is, there were 100 for every hour of the day and the night in rotation,
Wow.
perpetually singing the praise and service of God without rest or intermission, was recorded by Magonwi. And other authors picked up on that, like the late, and many would say the great John Michell. He wrote about the perpetual choirs. And then it created a geometry across the British Isles, which we call Albion. It's his ancient British name. And so across Albion, you had all it was creating a massive 10-fold geometry that was described by John Michell. And so in our mythology, you have all of the perpetual choirs, 24,000 saints or ancients singing the praise of the wonder of creation every hour of the day. So Stonehenge would have been a place where these songs, this praise was being perpetually said and linked into places like Glastonbury and in Wales itself, which is the source of the bluestones from Stonehenge. So there's another link. So it was probably back then a wondrous time to hear Stonehenge aloud.
Oh my gosh, that is incredible. I never knew that. And you just wonder if the stones were ringing like they are in your recording, and if it was actually audible to the naked ear. I wonder if that's even possible. I don't know, because I think we're hearing these ringing on your recording. We're actually hearing it ring through the ether, as opposed to 3D time space. But I don't know. They're definitely ringing, though. They are resonating like crazy, and we'll get to that in a bit. So why don't we bring in David Sarita next and get his take on some of this here. And David, as our regular listeners know, he's a regular guest on the show, and he's been providing some very fascinating data these past few months. And his items are there on the show page. You can check them out. So, David, do you want to add anything to what Maria's has said?
Oh yeah, I want to take people through kind of a visualization of the speed of sound and the speed of electromagnetic energy or radio frequencies, and the speed of sound in air. So you imagine a stone is ringing, and the speed of sound in the air would travel at 767 miles an hour. However, the speed of sound through the Earth's crust and actually through granite is about 13,000 miles an hour. And then the speed of sound in water is about 2,800 miles an hour, for example.
Wait a minute. Hold it. Back up. The speed of sound, or Mach 1, is 767
miles per hour. Yeah.
Miles per hour.
But when sound moves through a medium, in fact, the more dense the medium gets, the faster it moves. So it moves at over 13,000 miles an hour through granite. And bluestone would be approximately the same. In fact, the more dense, like tungsten, would be the fastest metal that sound moves through. That's why when you ring a metal bar, like an aluminum bar, the vibrations are. I mean, I've spent a lot of time on this, physically working with different metals and measuring the frequencies that it acoustically gives off, but also calculating how long a piece of metal has to be to produce a particular frequency. And when you get into shorter pieces of solid material, the frequency gets higher, but it's the resistance to which impedes upon that incredibly fast frequency in a solid material. Actually, the shorter it gets, the resistance increases. So it's really an amazing science. So try to visualize why the stones are sitting in these open plains instead of, on a rocky hillside. And try imagine when you drop drops of water, or drop pebbles into water, you get all these waves traveling away from, in a circular fashion or a holographic fashion, around where you drop the stone in the water.
Don't forget the underground that Maria talks about, these underground aquifers. I'm imagining the sound must go through the earth down into the underground waterways, right?
Well, yeah, the water moves about 4.3 times as fast as through the air. But then when you get into for example, a seismic wave is a sound wave because it's a pressure wave. They're moving over 13,000 miles an hour. So that means it goes halfway around the planet in 1 second. But then an electromagnetic wave, which generates the Tesla-Schumann resonance due to lightning strikes stimulating electromagnetic waves, they'll go around the planet over 7 times a second, right? So that means that the speed of sound in the solid crust of the Earth, imagine when a seismic event occurs, all these erect stones from Karnak in France to all the megalithic sites to Stonehenge, they're vibrating. And in response to that super fast wave moving through the Earth's crust.
Yes.
And then because they're piezoelectric, they'll give off a radio wave because they are semiconductive and conductive material stones. When you vibrate a crystal, it emits a radio frequency. Now, here's where it gets interesting. In reverse, if I stimulate the stone with a electromagnetic frequency, such as using the radio at a particular frequency, we're sending out these transmissions, then the inverse happens, but it's much weaker. It's very, very weak, but the inverse happens. That's reverberation, right? So sound has pressure, it has particle velocity, it has sound intensity, sound power, sound energy density, and it has acoustic impedance and audio frequency. That's sound. But sound is a pressure wave, which means like in space where there's an extremely low density environment in space, you can't hear sound acoustically because there's not enough resistance to create pressure.
Right.
So the inverse of pressure. So what I'm trying to say is, inversely, when you vibrate a stone, it emits an electromagnetic holographic wave. Now, notice again, these stone structures are sitting on these flat planes, and they're not, which means it's a very clean environment for them to radiate out a holographic picture of themselves at the speed of light, because that's what piezoelectricity response would be. But then the sound wave that moves through the earth that can stimulate those stones is going almost 13,000 miles an hour. And then if the stones were sitting in an aqueous environment, then that would be somewhere around 2,900 miles an hour. So sound is a bit of, it's quite, there's all these differentials to its function, meaning that one wave is traveling in the air at 767 miles an hour, then your electromagnetic response is the speed of light, and then your pressure wave going through the earth is around 13,000 miles an hour.
So what you're saying is that not only is the earth covered in these ley lines where energy travels and flows, there are also all these stones and places are connected by sound.
Well, exactly, because because if you ring one, you're going to ring all of them, because they're sitting erect above the surface of the earth on these flat plains. And if they were buried into hillsides, they wouldn't produce the resonance that they would with these stones, poking out above the surface of the earth. So I think that it is like a giant musical apparatus in a way, frequency musical apparatus, and they are functioning, and now I can understand how they're connected. Like, I did an experiment. I went to Arches Park with my kids and my wife years ago, and we were measuring the circles in Chaco Canyon with a Leica laser, and I found a perfect Holy of Holies, and which is, let me go back, because when we're talking about the Great Pyramid's King's Chamber and Queen's Chamber, the King's Chamber is 10 by 20 perfect cubits, the perfect cubit that I've mentioned on the show earlier, which is 20.601 inches per cubit. Now, that's the same measurement as Moses's tabernacle, which consisted of a rectangular tent, 10 by 20 cubits, which was called the Holy Place, and the Holy of Holies was 10 by 10 cubits, perfect cubits, which is the same measurement as the Queen's Chamber in the Great Pyramid, exactly. And we know from the studies in mathematics that the God of the prophets was using the same perfect cubit that the Great Pyramid was built on. So that means Moses's Holy of Holies and his holy place were identical measurements to the Great Pyramid King and Queen's Chamber. Now, if that is universal, which it appears to be, and remember, the Ark of the Covenant sits inside of the Holy of Holies, that cubic space, and that would be the Queen's chamber, and the staff of Aaron lay in the Ark of the Covenant, which is inside of the Holy of Holies, and the measurement of the staff is the same as the Ark of the Covenant because it lays in the covenant. So that's 2.5 cubits. And a wavelength coming off of a monopole antenna, 2.5 cubits, is times 4, would be 10 cubits, which would be the Holy of Holies, because that's 10 cubits, and that's the Queen's chamber.
So do you think the priests were in the king's chamber singing at different times of the year?
Well, that's what I'm saying. See, the staff would, as a monopole antenna, would receive and transmit at a wavelength exactly the same dimensions as the Queen's chamber, which is the Holy of Holies in Moses' tabernacle. Now, at the time of Solomon, it all increases by 2, which is an octave musically, right? An octave is times 2. So in Solomon's temple, the Holy of Holies is 20 by 20 cubits, and the holy place is 20 by 40, right? So it's now bigger than what's in the Great Pyramid. But it started at the same exact measurement. Which
if I could just interrupt, hey guys,
yeah,
just kind of extending off of what you've been talking about. I mean, I think the interesting thing that David's kind of talking about is that you're taking a look at these specific dimensions. The dimensions themselves end up creating these special ratios. So when we're talking about the holographic sort of matrix, we kind of get this sort of scalar effect. So when we're talking about what is so important of these geographical locations on this planet, well, our planet basically is a giant magnet. So you have a toroidal energy field that's kind of coming out, and it seems as though the ancients that were building these sites sort of knew where some of this energy was kind of flowing out of this toroidal field in higher sort of quantities. It's very scalar. I mean, you can take this, looking all the way down to like a proton. A proton, so small, still has a very similar field. The energetic field that comes out of a human being has this toroidal structure. So basically these frequencies, these sacred frequencies, are alluding to a special geometry that can have some type of an effect onto the holographic field or the ether or whatever you want to call it. So what's interesting is that in the Gnostic texts and what David's talking about, when you take a look at these ratios and these geometries, whether they're doubled, in an octave format or things like that, nature seems to always kind of gravitate towards these fundamental mathematical ratios, whether you're at the smallest of smalls going all the way up to the largest of large, whether you're talking about a planet or a solar system or a galaxy or things like that. So I just wanted to sort of add that there is this kind of mathematical and geometric correlation that's been documented, and we see the physical remnants of that just by the sheer geographic positionings of some of these ancient sites that are located around the world.
Yeah, indeed, the Stonehenge, according to Maria's upcoming book, she talks about ratios that are encoded into Stonehenge. Can you touch on that for us, Maria? Maria, are you there?
Yes. Yes. Sorry. Yes. There are lots of different types.
The ratios. Before she starts, ratio transcends frequency because ratio establishes harmony or disharmony. So I just want to put that in there.
Good point. Yes. Maria?
Yes, I mean, what the ancients were doing at places like Stonehenge, I mean, we can have all of the logical understanding of an ancient site through measurements and through encodement. But the experience is what I think the ancients were aiming at with the stones. And the blue stones, for example, are highly acoustic. If you go to their source, and there are many different quarries that have now been known other than Carn Many. So we're going to go to the source of the blue stones at Stonehenge. Then you can play them like a musical instrument. So there's lots of videos on YouTube with that. They ring. You only have to tap a blue stone, which is spotted dolerite or rhyolite, at places like Rhosophelin in Wales. Then you can get these amazing sounds back, just literally by tapping them like a drum. So when you went through the original entrance to Stonehenge and you enter the blue stone phase, we can envision that the ancients were allowing them to ring. I have a piece of blue stone in my home, a very large piece of blue stone that was actually worked by ancient man and made flat 6,000 years ago. And you only have to tap that slightly and it rings this amazing sound. And when you're stood for the experience by a blue stone, when it's ringing, it vibrates through your whole being in a cleansing manner.
That's incredible. See, when you talk about ringing a stone, that's what piezoelectricity is. See, it's a pressure wave. Piezo means pressure, and when you apply pressure to a crystal, which a stone is, it will emit a very weak radio frequency wave. So you're not only producing a sound wave, you're also producing an electromagnetic wave. That's why I was trying to tell you the different velocities of all these different waves. And then the inverse is you can hit a stone with an electromagnetic wave and the reverse function will happen. And so they're very, very sensitive instruments. And if the proportions are correct, like for example, let's say we disagree in the Ark of the Covenant, which sits in the middle of the Holy of Holies, which cubit to use, because everybody has different cubits. It actually doesn't matter because your ratio remains the same. So if I use a 16-inch cubit or an 18-inch cubit or a 20.601-inch cubit, and the arc is 1.5 by 1.5 by 2.5, it doesn't matter the unit of measure. The ratio is 1 to 1.66666666. And that remains the same regardless of the measure. And it's the same in a way with proportion of frequencies. If your proportion is correct, it's still going to sound harmonic. I've actually tested this with tone generators. You can come up with any fictitious number for tone number 1, and as long as tone number 2 and 3 are proper proportion, it's all going to sound wonderful. It's really amazing how that works. Now, when we were in Chaco Canyon and went to the Arches Park, my family, and we pitched our tent right, in the campground, right where some of the most beautiful arches are. I took a string and I used a Leica laser. I did this exact, and my kids and I set a circle of stones in a perfect Holy of Holies, and I pitched my tent right in it, and I meditated in my tent that night. And this was such a psychedelic experience. I mean, this is fully psychedelic and visual, but I'm not using any plants or anything like that. I'm just meditating. I was able to travel through the arch, and on the other side, I went to actual paradise. It was paradise earth. I was in a whole other world. There was all these beautiful colors everywhere, tremendous bliss and ecstasy. And then I would come back to our side. And then it would be the same boring earth that we have now and the same world government leaders. Then I would go to the other side of the arch, and I was in this paradise earth place. And I saw this full psychedelic. It was not, it's nothing in my mind. There's no way to describe what it was.
So you entered the multiverse, basically.
It's like I entered the parallel higher. I mean, I know a woman who did this plant-based medicine called iboga, and she described something very similar where this rectangle appeared in front of her, and her niece had died, and she went to the other side, and it was Earth, but it was paradise. It was a way better world than what's on this side of the reality. So that that happened to me in Arches Park, and it kept. I could go forward and backward in this full psychedelic vision, as if somebody gave me the best plant medicine on earth, but they didn't. All I did is put the circle. I made a stone circle with my kids, and I camped in the middle of it. Now, I've also done on my own property, I've buried magnets, like 14 magnets, in a perfect Holy of Holies under my grass. And amazing things have happened since I've done that, since I created a perfect circle. So I think these circles, now tell me what you know about this, Maria. I'd really like to know, did they build these stone structures on top of ancient crop circles that appeared from the other dimensional universe? The same thing I'm talking about that happened to me in Arches Park. Did they see the imprint on the ground first and then put the stones there? Is there any evidence of that?
Well, hold that thought, and when we come back, Maria, you can pick up on that. We're going to go take a break. You're listening to The Other Side of Midnight with Richard C. Hoagland. I'm your host tonight, Jonathan Womack. Don't touch that dial. We'll be right back. That is the wonderful, talented Ty Tabor with the song Coma from the album Balanced. And he plays all the instruments, and I love that guy. All right, so we're here talking with Thomas Mathers, David Sarita, and Maria Wheately. And David, would you repeat your question to Maria for us?
Yeah, I've had this theory for years that, in fact, there was a documentary I saw recently about the stone circles where, using aerial drones with special cameras, they could see these imprints under the soil that they remind me of crop circle imprints. And I'm wondering if there's any stories that go back to the ancient world where the crop circle would appear first as kind of like a template, a blueprint, where they would later place the stones. And one of the ways they could get the stones to, if it's as old as we think it is, if you had enough ice and you drilled or you cut a hole in the ice, you could slide the stones on the ice and tip them into the ice pit holes that aligned with the imprint holes. And then when the ice thawed, they would be sitting in their holes. I mean, it'd be easier to drag stones across ice than it would be grass using logs. I mean, there may have been a much more fantastic method. So there'll be two questions. One, do you think there was a template that appeared in the grass first, like a crop circle? And two, what are the theories about how the stones were actually set in place?
Well, the ice theory has been ruled out many years ago, mainly to geological understanding that the climate in England during the Neolithic was not like it is now. We had climate change. So there was no ice. There would have been, at the very worst in winter, just a very big slush. But that's been a popular idea. As for the crop circles, what you sometimes see beneath the stone circles is what's called a parch mark. And in archaeology, that's where something has been before. So before the stone circles, you had timber monuments, and they leave a parch mark. It was Terence Meaden that purported about the crop circles were the place where the stone circles went. But I disagree with that, because when you look to what's beneath the ground, and like Jonathan said earlier, you have yin aquifers of water. This isn't groundwater. This is water that's been generated deep within the earth itself. Then you have astronomical sight lines at Stonehenge, where you have the rising sun is at an angle to the major moon set, for example. So it's on a unique astronomical sight line. And most of the crop circles in this area are indeed, many say now, are purported to be by teams, which they put out before they put the design down. There are some genuine ones, but it's a big industry over here. So I think the stone circles are there because of astronomical sight lines and for deep aquifers and other genetic energies besides.
So these perpetual singers from back in the day, do you think their song would have been orchestrated with a specific frequency in mind? Like they want the song they're singing is engineered to, they want a certain outcome. They're looking for a certain resonance. So they sing in the key of A or whatever. Do you know what I'm trying to say?
Yes, I mean, at Stonehenge, it's unique because it's on open plain. Not all stone circles are on open plain. Avebury Henge, for example, is in the Kennet Valley on low-lying land. But at a place like Stonehenge, Reading University have done the most acoustic tests there, for instance, and whatever is said on the inside of Stonehenge cannot be heard on the outside, despite the gaps in the stones. And they've located lots of different frequencies by recording on what they call pink noise. So it is an acoustic temple. And like I say, you can ring the blue stones as well. And the blue stones are very human height, whereas the sarsen stones are gigantic in height.
Yeah, one of the images I have, one of my items shows it's a pitch curve, and the most activity seems to be right at the 432 megahertz, which I believe is what you were broadcasting on. That's the frequency you were broadcasting on. So I thought that was interesting that most of the ringing we hear throughout that 1 hour and 20 minutes, most of it is coming from that 432 frequency, which I think is pretty cool. So it tells me that if they were singing, if you imagine the Gregorian chants, let's say, oh yeah, and that would create a specific response from the stone in regards to what they were looking for on that particular day. And then on another day, maybe the solstice, they would sing this other song. And then on the winter solstice, they would sing this song. That's kind of the impression I got. Does that sound right?
Well, whereas in Eastern traditions, they often chant the Om, to the Celt, it's the Awen. And so the Awen is chanted at quite a low sound, and it means inspiration. It's actually spelled Awen, but it's pronounced Awen. So a lot of the ancient traditions were probably surrounded by this word. And when you resonate the Awen in a chant, it does generate a lot of energy.
Well, especially if you tune it so that when you're doing that, you can actually feel the sensation of it sort of vibrating either the third eye or, definitely when I'm sort of doing those types of meditations, I'll sort of feel those kinds of sounds will definitely sort of vibrate like the third eye or like the crown chakra. But you can kind of sort of find, that sort of resonance in your own body. And they do tend to be kind of around those tones that you hear people, chanting. So, lots of different cultures, seem to kind of gravitate towards that type of thing. And definitely if you take a look at things like hemisync from like the Monroe Institute, that type of vibration when you're doing, kind of getting into the deeper levels of a meditative state are kind of, based off of those type of like a body resonance and a body harmonic.
Thomas, do you want to go through your items?
Yeah, sure. So, yeah, for sure. Yeah. So this, let me just kind of pull them up so we can kind of follow along.
And to get there for our listeners, in case you don't know, just go to theothersideofmidnight.com, click on tonight's banner. That takes you to our show page. And then there are fast links to Thomas and the other guests. So your item number 1.
Yeah, so overall, so this basically this analysis compared to the last one was kind of interesting because, again, and this is something that you and I spoke about, Jonathan, that there seems to be sort of a palette, as you kind of listen to these recordings, you're kind of starting to familiarize yourself with different kind of sounds that are sort of featured into it. So over the course of the last, couple of radio shows where we've been featuring some of the, playing some of the audio from the recordings, you can hear that, first and foremost, it's very energetic. This has got more complexity than a standard sort of static. But what's interesting is that with these longer recordings, which we had really, really good success with Maria's last recording at Stonehenge, where we identified a little bit of a voice and some other really interesting tonal frequencies that came through that definitely seemed to be different than what you would sort of think about, either a natural sort of radio bounce or, a natural harmonic distortion being picked up from the radios themselves. So I went through this last night, and again for the listeners, basically the process that Jonathan and I have been sort of going through with this has been to look at the frequencies through some type of a visualization, through a spectral analyzer. And then we've been processing the sounds through different types of algorithms, looking for Morse code. But really the most success has really been just to be patient and to actually just listen to the entirety of the recordings, because that's where these things really kind of start to stand out. And that's kind of what happened last night when I was going through Maria's last recording. So if we play the baseline example number 1, this is just to kind of give you a sense as to what they generally, you're kind of listening to. This, if you kind of skim through I think the last recording, this one was about 75 or 80 minutes long that Maria was able to record. So you'll get periods of time where it's really just kind of doing this, and then there's some other things that as we go through this we'll sort of highlight. And I'm sure, Jonathan, this is kind of the same thing that you've been able to find. Jonathan and I have been kind of picking out sort of the similar oddities. We're both sort of picking out sort of similar types of things. So this first item number 1 is basically just to give the listeners an example of like a baseline reference of what the substance is. Now, one thing that I will put sort of preface to this is that where Maria was doing these recordings was a little bit sort of further outwards. So when she did the recording, which was the first attempt in Stonehenge where she was within the circle, the intensity was just so great that it was very chaotic, and it really was just too hot of a signal for us to really be able to kind of dig in and try to identify if there was anything sort of poking through. Because again, this is kind of like a call response type of thing. So we the substance of the message that's gone out is basically a series of different frequency tones that were done, and what we've done is the specific frequency of these tones are sort of done in ratios that represent important mathematical constants, or ratios, the golden ratio, pi, those kinds of things. So we've condensed down a bunch of very important mathematical ratios and some other important things, like, for example, the frequency sweep of the human hearing. So going from like a 20 hertz up to 20,000 hertz, and so we've constructed a nice, tidy. I believe the last one is about maybe a minute and a half or 2 minutes, but we've sort of condensed quite a bit of information and been able to kind of maximize the use of that bandwidth to kind of put some interesting stuff out there. So it's kind of a call and response type of thing. So if you go and play number one, what you'll hear, this is sort of, what we tend to, like, what we have been picking up in these transmissions. But the nice thing is that where she was located for the last one, where we got some amazing finds from, and where she did this one as well, I believe, is a little bit further out. So the intensity is not so great that it's masking any of this interesting other stuff that are, let's just call them oddities right now, and that we're trying to find some sort of order or logic or things to them. And there was definitely, as we kind of do this live, there's some interesting numbers that popped up, and I'm hoping that maybe as we kind of go through this, David, some of these numbers maybe will kind of resonate with David. So let's start off with the baseline example, and then we'll kind of go through and I'll explain to them. And this, again, kind of stretches from the very beginning of a recording, because there were some interesting things right off the bat, and then like all the way until almost the end of the 80-minute recording. So,
well, number one, your item number one is an image, right?
Oh, sorry. I'm looking at the SoundCloud link that has all of the different the different sort of files. The image that I sent was basically just for people to see what the spectral, at least the spectrum analyzer that I'm using, for how I'm looking for these little spikes. Where we're seeing these tonal frequencies kind of coming in that are different than what else is there. So it's like a definite sort of spike, and these spikes are happening at different places. And this is where in Maria's previous recordings, we got pi. It was like 99% close to the value of pi, and some other interesting sort of numeric frequency values. But again, so maybe if you can go to the SoundCloud link and start off with the baseline example.
Yeah, here we go. This is the baseline example.
Are you hearing something? Hello?
Yeah, we hear it.
Oh, I can't.
I hear it. You can't hear it?
No, we can't hear it. All right, is anybody else hearing it?
Okay, I'm going to pause.
No, I can't hear it.
You guys aren't hearing this. Okay.
I
think, Keith, you probably have to play it from your end.
Okay. This is item 2.
Item 2 and number
Baseline.
1. Yeah, the baseline example.
Oh, sorry. I got to cue it.
Oh yeah, so we'll have to kind of pause it in between because it'll just cycle through and play the whole thing.
Okay. What's the one that we're listening to right now?
Yeah, so that was it went into the next one, and so what we'll have to do is, I guess, when you play it, when you sort of see the end of it, you can just kind of press pause, and it'll so yeah. So the first one basically, that kind of like almost helicopter sound seems to be this kind of recurring sort of sound that we're picking up. And that's kind of generally what you're kind of hearing for most of the recording. It seems to kind of wave in and out in intensity. There doesn't seem to be any kind of logic or any kind of like sort of format to it. It's pretty organic. Sometimes it will just suddenly come in a lot louder, and other times it just kind of slowly fades out. And then there's all sorts of interesting stuff that seems to, by all sorts. I think in general, off of this recording, I was able to identify, so I guess 10 interesting frequencies that stood out as kind of being like, this doesn't sort of go along with what I was expecting. So the number 2, which happened at 1 minute and 10 seconds. Okay, you can press pause now. Yeah, so maybe we'll play that one again. I don't know if, Keith, you're able to put the volume up a little bit, but as you can hear, there's a frequency sweep that kind of comes in. It almost has like a whining effect to it. Now, the interesting thing is that this is not, we're not picking up any other sounds like this. We haven't in any of like hours, literally at this point, of recordings, have not sort of.
Sorry.
Just the equinox.
Exactly. So I think if Keith, if you can play number 2 again, just to sort of, so that you can kind of hear this. It's yeah. Okay, now if you press pause. Now the interesting thing with that is those are 2 unique tones. So those frequencies are not just a static frequency. So the sound is kind of changing. It's got a musical kind of effect to it, and those would represent kind of 2 sort of tonal sweeps. And there is no sound like that in anything that we were sending out. So that happened like a minute into the recording. I was, it was very, very interesting. And
when I heard that, I was taken aback too.
Yeah, I'm sure you found that one as well. It was pretty.
It sounds metallic. It sounds like a metallic sheen.
Yeah. Yeah. So we'll move on to number 3. So at the 3-minute mark was the first frequency spike. So we have been getting. Yeah. Go ahead, Keith. Yeah, you can press pause. So as you can hear, like out of nowhere, that sort of frequency comes in. Now, I think maybe a lot of people would be like, okay, well, that's really not that interesting. It just kind of sounds like, some distortion or something like some type of feedback. But the thing is that it's a very definite frequency that it's coming in, and it doesn't repeat itself. It doesn't happen again in hours of recording. So the value of that one came in at 3.52 kilohertz, or 3,520 hertz. So I don't know if there's anything interesting about that number, David, offhand.
Did we lose David?
David? I must have stepped away.
Oh yeah. I'm sorry, my microphone was muted. It's close to a very interesting number. I wonder how exact your frequency analysis of that is.
If put it this way, I think there might be, after the 2, the 3.5 definitely, the 2. It could be 2.1, 2.3, 2.4. I can't. My frequency analyzer doesn't go into 3 decimals.
3,520 is what you're saying is the base number.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, I'd have to look at it.
So I'm going to give you these. I'm going to give you these numbers, but that's why. I mean, I'm just. I mean, if something just kind of pops out, I mean, I think it's worth discussing. There's some other interesting ones that we're coming into that are actual chords and other two-tone, which were the super interesting ones to me because the two-tone frequencies are what we sent out. So it was that format. The format that we sent out was like, for example, pi was one frequency and then another frequency, and then the response double that time, which was the value of pi converted over to a frequency. So that was the format, 1, 2 with a result. So the interesting thing is that we've got a couple of these two tones that come a little bit later on. And, I definitely think that, for the next attempt that I would like to recreate those tones, send them back out, and then send the response with us doing the division. But if you go over to, Keith, if we go over to item 4, the fourth sound. So this happened at the 7-minute mark. And this was the first time that we kind of picked up almost like a tonal chord. So this means... Okay, and you can play it again. It's very short when it comes in, but maybe just play it one more time and I'll count it. Sorry. Yeah, Keith, that was actually number 5. If you can go back and play number 4, please.
That was the 2.4 one that I just played, I thought. It went to 5?
Yeah.
Okay.
That was number 5. Number 4. Yep. And that's it. So, you can press pause. It's very, very fast. Some of these recordings are quite short because these little oddities kind of come in, and that's what we're sort of doing is we're listening to it, we're pulling these kind of areas that have these sort of oddities, and then we're kind of doing a deeper dive. So the interesting thing with that one, it was kind of one of the first tonal chords. It had a bit of a similar sort of texture and overall quality as the frequency sweep and whine, which has been a different type of sound that we've picked up from any of the other previous recordings. But the frequencies for that chord were 1.85 kilohertz or 1850 hertz and 2.43 kilohertz or 2430 hertz. So, and that was together, played as a chord, which I thought was quite interesting. So, again, those numbers for me, and the numbers are not necessarily, my strong point, or the forte, but these are, again, it's all stuff that people can go and listen to. It's a SoundCloud link, and there's enough information here that people can go back and listen to it. And if anybody has any additional insight, by all means get in touch with the show, and we're trying to open source this. I mean, we're doing what we can in this kind of analysis, but if any of these numbers are kind of ringing a bell or sort of bringing something up, by all means, anybody out there, to sort of come back to us with any other suggestions. So we'll move over to number 5, which we played before. This was, again, just another frequency kind of spike that hit, because
this is the 9-minute 1.92.
Yeah, so this happened at 9 minute. It's a very short one. So I've repeated it 3 times. So that's why you're going to hear it 3 times. I've repeated that 3 times just so that you can kind of focus your ears' attention to it and then kind of hear what that... Oh, that's number 6. That was actually number 6. If we can go back to number 5. So you can hear in the back. I
call that the bird whistle on my items.
Yeah. So like in the so you picked that one up as well, Jonathan. That's
picked
great.
Up like 40 on my notes.
So then if we move over to number 6, these were the ones that I've highlighted were the ones that I felt like really kind of stood out the most. Mm-hmm. So if we move over to number 6.
Yeah, we're coming up on a break in about 30 seconds. So
okay.
Oh yeah, let's go to break then. You're listening to The Other Side of Midnight with Richard C. Hoagland. I'm your host, Jonathan Womack. We will be back shortly. And welcome back to The Other Side of Midnight. We're speaking with Maria Wheately, David Sarita, and Thomas Mathers. And Thomas is taking us through some of his items and oddities. So please continue, Thomas.
Okay, so we'll pick it up again. So we'll go over to number 6. So I found we're jumping now from the 9-minute mark to 41 minutes. Between 9 minutes and 41, I didn't find there to be anything that kind of really stood out in a super potent way. And this just kind of goes to show that, it's not like these things are happening very often. So, I mean, if you really take a look at how much of what we're highlighting it's probably a total of maybe 15, 20 seconds over the course of 80 plus minutes of recording. So the interesting thing with this one was it was a 2-tone, which again is kind of like the call and response that we've been doing with the transmissions. So if Keith, you want to play number 6, this is happening at the 41 minute and 30 second mark, and it's a 2-tone frequency.
Okay, give me 1 second.
Yeah, no problem.
I've got my audio out of sync here. Okay, coming at you. I think this is right. I don't think that was number 5, was it?
Yeah, number 6. Yeah, that was it. Number 6.
Okay. For some reason, it was partially paid. Okay, I didn't get the whole thing because it was started in the middle.
Yeah, it sounded like it started halfway through. Because that was the second that what we were listening to was the 2030 hertz.
Okay, you want me?
Let's hear it again, Keith.
Okay.
Yeah, it's the sound clouds. So again, the interesting thing here is that that's similar to the type of tone that we're sending out. The thing is that these sounds are playing for much longer than what is actually in the recording. The recording that we're sending out.
And what we were hearing there that you want people to notice was the
exactly
the 2, yes.
Exactly. So we're going from 871 hertz, and then it jumps up to 2030 hertz. So again, I think what I'd like to do is that for the next transmission, we're going to do exactly that. We're going to concentrate on 871, and then we're going to do 2030, and then what we'll do is we'll do the division, and we'll send out what the answer to that is, because that's what we've been sending out. So that's what's really strange about this, because the thing is that we've been sending out like basically 3-tone transmissions. So it'll go 1 tone for like 2 seconds or 4 seconds, and then another tone for 2 seconds or 4 seconds. And then for double that time, so for about 8 seconds, you would have the response. So the thing is that there's only 2 tones here. I mean, if this was part of the original transmission, which it's not, then there would have been a third value there, which there isn't. Mm-hmm. So that's what's really interesting. So, and again, this was kind of, I believe, Jonathan, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think this was the first time that we've picked up basically a sequence like this, like a very specific 2-tone kind of callback, basically.
Yeah, I would agree. Yeah.
Yeah. So moving on to number 7, I mean, not to just kind of be dismissing this, because it's certainly strange to me. I mean, and this happened at 41 minutes and 30 seconds into the recording.
It's
so just
significant.
It is significant. So then we kind of fast forward to the 64-minute mark, approximately 64 minutes and 16 seconds into Maria's recording. We get another 2-tone. So we can pause that. That is unmistakable. Like, I mean, that sounds like a whistle, like, yeah. And we're going from 3.02 kilohertz or 3020 hertz to 3.67 kilohertz or 3670 hertz. And these values that I'm giving, I would say, are probably accurate to about 99% plus. Again, because we're not looking at a third decimal, they might be a little bit off, but generally, so these are the kinds of numbers. So again, at no point did we send that out. We didn't send that out.
These are all common frequencies that we hear every day in music and dialogue and things like this.
Yeah. I mean, like, anywhere below kind of your, like, I would say like 6, 7, 8,000 hertz. That's getting pretty high up there anyways, but this is kind of really within kind of the hearing that we have. I mean, our frequency range, like the technical human frequency range, is 20 hertz, which is very low, which is a bass sound, up to 20,000 hertz, which is something that children can definitely hear. But as you age, dogs can actually hear it beyond. It's even above, higher than that. I think it's like 23 or 24,000. That's why dog whistles can't be heard. But as your ears age, and this is just the same for everybody, you do kind of lose that ability to hear the higher frequencies. So, older people will have a hard time hearing stuff that's, above 18,000. I mean, those are high frequencies. So these are like, I mean, this is unmistakable. And I mean, again, it's kind of coming out, and this is where, Jonathan, where we heard the almost ping pong kind of sound coming back in, which we heard a lot in the last recording. This one, it didn't really start until kind of the 60-minute mark with this kind of like, like ping pong sort of popping sound.
And I notice when the tones come in like that, it affects the surrounding
tones, like the surrounding textures.
Correct.
Yeah. But I mean, these are very significant. This is a sine wave. I would say 90% it's a sine wave, just based off of listening to it, which is what we've been sending out. So, sound will oscillate in different kind of ways, and most sounds that you hear can be recreated as a combination of your sort of fundamental sound, vibration, oscillation shapes. So, your common shapes would be like a sawtooth, which would look kind of like the edge of like a saw. So like a triangular up and down, up and down, up and down. And that's the type of vibration that is oscillating to generate an audible tone. A sine wave, which is kind of, sort of the most organic, is it's a very kind of circular. It's a curved line, and that's why I chose to send out sine waves in the transmission that we put out. You also have square waves, which is another type of kind of primitive, if you want to call it, oscillation shape. And then there's random. There's like a noise. There's different ones, but the sine wave, I would say this is what we're hearing back is a sine wave. So the question is, what or who is obviously had listened to a sine wave and then sent a sine wave back, because the radios are not going to generate a sine wave in a specific frequency like this. And if we were picking up some type of like a distortion, like a harmonic distortion, it wouldn't be this really does not sound like what like a harmonic distortion would kind of sound like. There's a little bit too much intent. So like that's why I think that the numbers are important for us to kind of take a look at. And this was the second. There was so I mean we had the tonal chord at 7 minutes, and then we had the two-tone at the 64 minutes, and then the two-tone at 41 minutes, and then another two-tone at 64 minutes, and then so that was it for the two tones.
I'd like to stop you there, James. And I want to check in with Maria and Dave, because I'm wondering, Maria, if what James has been saying, if that sparks any thoughts in you. Like, are we hearing, when you hear these tones, do you feel like you're hearing the blue stone, and then this tone, this is the lintel stone? Do you hear different stones ringing? Is that what it sounds like to you?
Well, certainly it's very fascinating, the analysis of both yourself and Thomas. And I feel that, like, when we go back to saying the days that I did this transmission, I did feel the stillness there. I think the most powerful stones at Stonehenge are probably the trilithons themselves. They were put up first, and then the circle came afterwards. And when you walk into the center of Stonehenge, that's when you feel something very, very powerful. And in between that, you have the blue stones. So my sense, my feeling, and my subjective sense is that it's the trilithons. They are mighty and they are powerful.
Because I think what we're doing is we're sending out sine waves over 432 megahertz. So that 432 megahertz is kind of geometrically kind of connected to what we are guessing is the geometric structure of the holographic ether. Okay. And so our ideas from the very beginning, before you even went out to Stonehenge, Maria, was this idea that sacred sites, but Stonehenge in particular, were kind of like natural signal amplifiers, which was the rationale that we don't need a super high powered antenna or some type of a device to put a really powerful signal out. What we're doing is, I think the combination of the intent and the specific geometries connected to the frequencies that we're sending these out on would be amplified in these natural amplifiers and putting a signal out. And because we are kind of putting almost questions or, doing like a call response type of action, I mean, we're getting responses back. And what we're trying to do is basically, find some type of logic behind it. But there seems to be an increasing amount of logic coming back in these responses. I mean, we were definitely, I think, all taken aback with the voice that I was able to find deep into this from the last recording. But I think some of these numbers are actually kind of a little bit crazier because this completely relates to what we're sending out. So it's kind of like what you would expect to be getting back in, other than, to be, a little hyperbolic, like, somebody coming back and saying, oh, hey, I'm here and I'm hearing what you're doing. Obviously, we would love to have that. But I mean, we don't know if the messages are being sent out over space, a dimensional shift, a time shift. I mean, who knows? But there is substance and there's logic coming back in these responses. And definitely as we kind of go through the remainder of the items, the two last items, as far as I'm concerned, completely, did it for me. So if we move along.
Before we go there, let me mention too about, Richard and I had talked about back in December how we believe that Mars is I call it rock tech, and the rock is all laced with these materials that allow it to think in an AI type of structure. So when you zoom out from the planet and look at it as a whole, it's a smart planet. And the Earth could be the same way. Maybe the ancients were setting the Earth up to be this type of rock tech AI. And that could be, it could be aliens that we're getting this from, or it could be a smart planet. But
here's the thing, is that these special positions on the planet geometrically, and Mars is the same thing. You can take a look at Saturn and the hexagonal pull on Saturn. We can see astronomically at scale that this pattern, this energy pattern, seems to be there's cohesiveness behind it. So whether you're talking about something very small going all the way to something very big and even bigger, right? So this is why I think, and we're kind of existing at an interesting time, as humans in this civilization, because I feel that we're sort of crossing this moment where actual physics are very quickly starting to kind of cross over to this sort of more metaphysics. So if we really, people that have looked at, this kind of idea of non-locality, and, or why would remote viewing work? Well, remote viewing would work if the matrix that we're all basically consisting of is all connected like a spider web together, right? So if we understand what the geometry of what that hyperdimensional spider web is like, no different than when a fly lands onto a spider web and sort of vibrates the spider web, and the spider being attuned to it, what we're trying to do is basically become attuned to the hyperdimensional web construct of our reality and space in the universe. And
they overlap there at Stonehenge.
Exactly. And the thing is that so Stonehenge being an amplifier of Earth's energy, right? So like Stonehenge, that particular position is important in relation to Earth's overall energetic field and the toroidal energy kind of fields. So we're tapping into that to try to use it to amplify the message going out. And we're trying to put in terms of what the substance of the message is, that we have some type of rudimentary understanding of what, these numbers or these kind of ratios, for example, like, highlighting the golden ratio. Well, the golden ratio in our reality, in this universe, is massively important, because you see in self-assembling systems, whether it's just molecules or things like that, how plants grow, how cells grow, everything sort of gravitates towards that ratio. The golden ratio is the ratio of life itself, which, is at least related, I think, to our dimension and our universe. So
and another aspect would be the water cymatics. So these tones, I'm wondering if they're making patterns, like spirograph patterns in the water, in the ground.
Exactly. So when we're sending something out at 432,000 hertz, right? Well, it's vibrating just like that special frequency does in a cymatic. So what we're doing is basically we're trying to tap into like a hyperdimensional, like vibrational cymatic idea. And this is what we're sending out, and that's where we're listening. And I mean, the interesting thing is that, I mean, obviously Maria being in a natural amplifying location, that's going to work both sending something out and receiving. So I think, taking a step back, at a sort of more macro level of what we've been trying to do with these experiments, is now we're really kind of seeing the importance of being somewhat geographically located to a natural amplifier, a natural antenna. And that's why we can use a handheld ham radio and be able to be sending these messages out. The other thing is that we don't really know, because we're not relying on the speed of light or the speed of an electromagnetic signal, because we're kind of tapping into this, not quantum level, but this like holographic level of this, we have no idea. Like, I mean, is this vibrating something to an adjacent dimension or universe? Or is this, is this resonating to immediately to something or some consciousness or some intelligence on a planet? Is it a being? Is it a galaxy? Like, we don't understand what consciousness really is in terms of our own humanity. So,
and
like,
there was a point where I wondered, pardon me, but I wondered if it's possible that we are also getting these from the supposed underground ET bases that Pat Price remote viewed back in the 70s. And if they're coming up through the ground instead of from space or somewhere outside, they might actually be coming from inside the Earth.
Well, here's the thing. I think that this matrix, this holographic matrix, is what people are going to tap into for energy purposes, communication purposes. This is just the dawn. Now, this is esoteric. This has been recorded in esoteric knowledge. So there's, very ancient civilizations that have known this and potentially understood this far better than we do, right? So, but kind of back to, how this, kind of relates back to the experiment. We're creating a dialogue. And the dialogue seems to be improving, and the resolution of the responses seems to be improving. And it's not like we're going out there. It's like fishing. I mean, we're not going out there trying to find something. And this is not BS. Like, this is auditable. There is a chain of custody to these WAV files. We can tell if these WAV files have been modified. So these were recorded by Maria in these locations. And then we can give these files to any other person and just give them these timestamps, and they can go and take a listen to this. So if somebody does have a more rational explanation for any of these, because there's a variety of different sort of elements and different things that we're picking up, then by all means, I mean, we're totally open for it. But I mean, I'm coming at this with 30 plus years of audio related experience. Jonathan, you come with your, all of your different experience. David, same thing. And, together we're basically analyzing what really is turning out to be some very interesting and what seem to be intelligent responses. So,
well,
I mean,
we have 6 minutes before the break. Why don't you take the next 5 minutes to go through your last,
Yeah. So we've already done the two tones. So, I mean, let's get to the ones that are, the really interesting ones. So, I mean, in number 6, we have like another kind of whining sound that repeats 3 times, or sorry, number 8. So we'll play
78 minutes, 17 seconds?
No, this is at 65 minutes. No, we'll skip. Yeah, okay. We'll play number 8, and then number 10 and 11. Those are the most important ones to finish with. So if, Keith, we can line up number 8, that'd be fantastic. So again, yep. So that to me kind of, when I first heard it, almost sounded like a cat meowing. I've repeated that 3 times, so it just came in once, that meow. But again, it's a very different type of tone that we're picking up. So we'll jump to number 10, and I just called it like the eerie tone sweep, because I didn't really. It's exactly what it sounds like. It's eerie.
I call that one the passing train.
It sounded like, and yeah. So, I mean, the interesting thing with that, I mean, I would classify that as a Doppler effect. But
That's
like
the Doppler,
what?
yeah.
But what is making that sound?
Yeah, I know.
I don't know if I don't know, Keith, if you want to play that one again, because that's a really, was kind of one of the. Oh, sorry, that was number 11. If we can go back to number 10.
Eerie tone sweep.
And the craziest thing with that is that it is affecting the other parts of the noise, like in a very different and kind of unique way. So for me, that was the standout. That was the most interesting thing that we captured.
Yeah.
Because it was just, I mean, it straight up sounds like something that you would hear in a science fiction movie. Like, I mean, it's very odd. And then we'll just kind of finish this up before the bottom of the hour or the next break. Number 11, this was really... So I thought that was really interesting because you're getting like a 3-note step. I
think I called that the fax tone on my items. Yeah.
So it was really interesting that it kind of, and each note step had like, I think 2 or 3 different like da 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 da. But again, just out of nowhere, and in any of our previous recordings haven't picked anything like that up. So, I mean, that was kind of the analysis from this last one. And again, I mean, we have yet to do a recording, to send out a message, listen, and not get anything so far. Each time has been a little bit different, and we found some really interesting stuff. So, yeah.
Very interesting.
Yeah, Jonathan. Yeah, it's very cool that you picked up a lot of these as well, because there's obviously a lot to listen to there. But yeah, really, 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 really interesting stuff there.
Well, I'll go through my items a bit later, but we're coming up on the break, and what I would like to put forth to David and Maria and Thomas. By the way, Thomas has a pen name or a pseudonym, James. So sometimes I will call him James by accident, but his real name is Thomas. So what I'd like to put forth is, if you folks have a take on what the basic differences, if any, what are the basic differences between the types of technology we see with the Great Pyramid, Stonehenge, which is much older, and then the arches, which are much, much older. There are 3 different technical, they're pieces of technology, and they operate in similar ways, but they're all different too. And I kind of have some thoughts on this, so I thought I would put that out there to you guys. And when we come back, maybe we can touch on that and get some thoughts from you folks. So, Keith, if you want to go ahead and fire up the music, we can head into a break here. You're listening to The Other Side of Midnight with Richard C. Hoagland. My name is Jonathan Womack. We will be back after this break. Do not touch that dial. And welcome back to The Other Side of Midnight. That song was called Lazy Camel by Michael C. Ramir. And he's one of my favorite artists. You can find his music on mixkit.com and audiojungle.net. And another shout out to our engineer extraordinaire, Keith Morgan, who's always in the background. And Keith, he's taken over the webmaster duties from Cynthia, and he's doing a great job. And boy, his loyalty and commitment is, I find, really impressive. So thank you, Keith. Now let's get back to our subjects. And the question I put out before the break, I wonder if David or Maria, David, do you have anything to add after hearing Thomas's items? Would you like to pitch in?
Well, I mean, I was kind of going in a very abstract direction when I was listening to Thomas. First of all, that really choppy sound, that like that makes it impossible for me. I don't know what happened this time, but that makes it impossible for me to look at numbers the way I look at numbers, because that's kind of
too much static noise, kind of.
It's not
really,
static.
really
It's like
pollutes it.
It really pollutes it. And I had that happen once when I was using my radio and I went direct from cable into recorder. I got a similar thing, but I know we hadn't had that before. But I'm just letting you know that I can't look at numbers the way I look at numbers with that. But when I listen to what Thomas is picking up, my mind just zeroes in and I eliminate all that noise on these incredible frequencies and sounds that he's tuning into. And what I started to think of, again, because one of the things I started with tonight is how the speed of sound propagates at different velocities through different materials. And it turns out that initially it was thought that the fastest material sound moves through is diamond, but actually beryllium, beryl, is much faster. And beryllium is, of course, in aquamarine and emerald gems, and beryllium dust is extremely toxic, but also the descriptions of Ezekiel's wheels by the prophet Ezekiel were that he thought the wheels were made out of beryllium. And of course, if you extracted beryllium from the gem, it's kind of a metal. It's a metal, and it produces a vibration that goes over 30,000 miles an hour. I mean, almost 30,000 miles an hour. So there's nothing faster vibrationally than beryllium. So I was thinking of the speed of sound in bluestones, which is feldspar and quartz and mica. And I was thinking of, okay, what is the sound see, when you create a sound with a speaker, you're vibrating different materials depending on what that speaker is made out of, what the magnet is made out of. And this
it's vibrating the air, right? So
it vibrates the air, but different metals sound different.
Yeah.
Right? Like aluminum actually vibrates incredibly fast. The speed of sound moves through aluminum amazingly fast. And iron too, is incredibly fast. But nothing's faster than beryllium. So, but every metal has a different, if I produce the same frequency and I vibrate aluminum, it's a little softer than iron. Like it has a different quality to the frequency. So frequency alone is not it. And I was thinking these sounds that Thomas is zeroed in on are like they sound like a vibrating metal, and I'm trying to identify the metal. And again, different metals, the speed of sound moves at different velocities. They're not all the same. They're all completely different. And that really interests me as a subject. I've always been interested in that. Like, what does gold sound like versus tin, right? Like gold is going to actually, the speed of sound is not going to move very fast through gold or lead because they're very dampening. They're going to be really warm compared to a harder material. Harder material will vibrate faster, right? Like diamond is compressed carbon. So
well, and that's it. But that's what's also interesting is that like it's got a very metallic sort of characteristic. Got a characteristic to it, but it's being like what we're sending out is like more connected towards like more of like a rock source, right?
Well, what we do in radios to generate 432 megahertz, for example, we tend to use quartz, and we vibrate quartz with an electric charge, a tiny quartz crystal, to generate radio frequencies. That's how we generate radio frequencies. But quartz isn't very fast. It's amazing. We probably haven't even thought of what could happen if we generated radio waves with something that moves much faster, and that would be diamond, and next is beryllium. So diamond and beryllium are the fastest vibrators there are. And that means there may be a message they're trying to tell us. There's something they're trying to tell us. And if they're trying to send us a message, then maybe there's a message, because it sounds more metallic than quartz.
It does. And the crazy thing is that those sounds from like as a from like a sound design perspective. So like as a sound designer, you learn to recreate like organic sounds using electronic fundamental these like those frequencies that I was talking about before, like your sine waves or your square waves or your triangle waves. So different combinations and multiples of these. So if you've got 8 oscillators or 16 oscillators, you can craft really complex sounding textures and tones, by further incorporating different types of modulations or things like that. So the thing that's really interesting about these metallic sounds is that these are complex sounds. I mean, it's not a kind of a fundamental sound. Like that is a tremendously more complex. If I was to recreate that sound, that is a complex sound to recreate compared to me just having to recreate, an 871 hertz sine wave, right?
Oh yeah, no doubt. It's metallic. It's not like if you ring a quartz bowl, like glass. Let's say glass Pyrex vibrates. It sound will move it.
Well, here's the thing: for it to go down, for it to Doppler down like that, you would either have to bend whatever the source of the sound is, or it would have to move away and be getting louder as it's moving away to keep the same amplitude modulation. So like that bending noise, that to recreate
right
to recreate that sound physically, like imagine if you like with a string, like if you're vibrating a string, you'd have to like pull it tight and vibrate it and then sort of let it kind of loose. I mean, when you really start deconstructing how you would recreate that particular noise, it's not just
I know, that's what I'm saying. Like if I blow through a grass reed on my hand, it has, because it's grass, it has a certain vibration to it, right? If you ring an aluminum bar or a glass bar, and I've done all this, or an iron bar, I don't really like the sound of iron myself.
Well, I have the most important question here for Maria. Were there any trains in the proximity of Stonehenge when you did
No, those aren't trains. It sounds like trains. I had the same thing happen here. No, it's something happening through the connection. Because Maria, you're going from the radio cable out. You're not recording through the microphone, right?
No, it's going from a line out.
No.
Yeah,
and there's no trains.
Yeah, so I can. Sorry, Maria, to interrupt, but I'll explain sort of from a technical perspective how we're doing the recording, because this is not something that we've really spoken about. So Maria is using a sound recorder, and the sound recorder has sort of 2 ways that you can record through it. It's got very high quality microphones, but then you can also have a line in. Now, the radios, we're using basically what would normally connect to a single mono earphone out of the radios into the sound recorder. So the unfortunate thing is that we're not able to record a stereo field sound because there's only one sound source. So when you take a look at the waveforms that we analyze, It's only coming in on one side, because normally the earpiece that you would connect to the ham radio would just be kind of like a single earpiece. So even if some of the helicopter sounds would be, some type of feedback, if that was the feedback that we're picking up, it still doesn't explain any of these. Any of the stuff that we've been really focusing on, because we haven't really been focusing on, that kind of helicopter sound, other than the fact that helicopter sound seems to get way, 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 way more intense the closer Maria gets to the center of Stonehenge, to the point where when she did do the recording of the center of Stonehenge, all we could hear was that helicopter sound. So
I'd like to put a question to Maria, and that is, do you think it's possible, using our current level of technology, is it possible to map the frequency of the stones in Stonehenge? For example, this blue stone resonates at this frequency, or do they all resonate at exactly the same frequency, or are they all different? What do you think about that?
I would imagine that they're all different, but that would be a very interesting project to do, because even when it comes to the large sarsen stones at Stonehenge, you have different qualities within them. For example, one of the trilithons has more iron in it, so it's a very reddish hue. So there's quite a few iron sections within Stonehenge itself, and so I think that would add to its change in frequency, and that trilithon is actually in situ, and some of the stones at Stonehenge were put in a different position when they were re-erected. So the ones that are in situ have very strange properties within them themselves, and you can look at it at a glance.
Do you know what the most common metal would be in Stonehenge? Is there one metal that's more prevalent than the others?
In the actual sarsen stones themselves, it's iron.
Iron, okay.
So, sorry, just wanted to kind of interject with something. Maria, with your near field recorder, the quality of those microphones is it's very, very good. I think what could be really interesting is at some point, because you were mentioning that you have a stone that vibrates, that when you that makes a tone, like a flat stone.
In your house.
In your house?
Yeah.
Yes. What would be interesting would be to just use your recorder close to it. It can just be, somewhat close, like within a foot or 6 inches or something. And then however you can make it sort of ring, if we could record that so we could kind of listen to it, because that near field recorder will do a really nice job of recording that. And then we can also take a look to see what frequency that is at. And then sort of a second sort of point is, again, because the microphones on her particular recorder are quite sensitive, it could also be kind of interesting just as an experiment, as we kind of figure out maybe some other ways that we can connect some type of a low profile kind of sensor to the stones, whether via a wire or something. That again, we kind of just experiment just with the microphone and see if there's anything that's picking up, because I believe that the sensitivity of those microphones goes up quite high. So I was just kind of throwing out there as an idea, if there is another opportunity to be able to sort of go there with your recorder to sort of maybe record some different kind of in some different kind of ways as well.
Could you do that, Maria?
Yes, I could. I mean, I can do that in my own home. I've got very large pieces of sarsen, which is made up at Stonehenge, and bluestone. And also where I live quite close to the Avebury stone circles, the largest stone circle in the world, the outcrop there is very large as well. So by outcrop, I mean that's the kind of source of the sarsen stones for Avebury and indeed Stonehenge. And I can go there and do some recordings as well.
And so maybe what you could do is Yeah, maybe what you could also do is sort of in those locations use some of your dowsing skills to sort of identify maybe some very kind of energetic areas, and then try to do the recordings from those particular positions.
And should we do it on a particular day as well, Maria? Shouldn't it?
Well, yes. I mean, Yes, I mean we're coming up to Beltane on May the 1st. That's the next festival date coming up.
Oh.
So that's quite close time, and again it's one of the portal days. And Beltane is really one of the strongest times of the year. Like I was saying, Midsummer's Eve is very strong, and so is Beltane.
Let's plan on that if it fits into your schedule.
That would be fantastic.
What about getting a recording of the stones with a really good microphone and then transmitting that at 432 megahertz?
That's what I was just going to say, is that if Maria, if your schedule permits it, if you could record some of the stones that you have at your home, and then what we can do is actually incorporate that as well as some of the answers from this recording that we just analyzed, and some of the encoded frequencies, again, refining the message going out. I think, the fact that this is close to your home, it would be really fantastic to be able to kind of do that as a next part of the experiment, to try to get some other data to be able to analyze.
Yes.
Good idea.
Can you actually record in the field, like, can you ring one of the big stones in Stonehenge, the blue stone and the sarsen, and can you actually hear it acoustically so that you could record it if there was no background wind or car traffic or anything like that?
I can certainly do the sarsen stones in situ like that, David, but the blue stones are about 120 miles away from me. But I am going to the blue stones in the summer, so I could do some recordings of the blue stones sounds.
Yeah, if you held a microphone on a stand really close, just like a couple of millimeters away from the stone, and if you did it at a time of day when there's no background traffic. I don't know how far away that freeway is. I remember going there, but I just can't remember.
Well, she's going to be going to a site that's closer to her home, which I think is fantastic because it's kind of going to allow us to do like an A/B test, based off of just more of like the.
But can you imagine, Thomas, if you could analyze the wave structure of the ringing of that type of stone?
Well, she could be, at that point, if like whenever she goes back to Stonehenge, in the summertime or whenever, all she would really need to do is really just kind of place the near field recorder directly onto the stone themselves. These near field recorders, can pick up a lot. Now, the thing is that beyond your acoustic range, like the human hearing range, what you and I should be looking at are there other, how, and maybe this is a question that we can put out to the audience if anybody has any kind of an idea as to how you would sort of detect, I guess, more of like a geologic vibration. I'm sure there's some type of a geological sensor that would sort of allow you to kind of, identify those types of vibrations. But I think that, Maria, I think, we were all kind of wondering what the next step would be with this. If you'd be willing to go out and do that, I think that would be a really amazing thing, and probably a little bit less stressful for you to kind of be doing this a little bit covert, as you've kind of had to do in not so obvious way when you've gone to Stonehenge to do this, right? Just out of respect of the site and everything else. So I think this could be really interesting, and it would be great to be able to try to incorporate something from your own collection of stones as part of the transmission that would go out.
Yes, I can do that. Not a problem, and it's never a problem to go to Stonehenge anyway. So it's all good from my point of view. But I think it would be good to, like you say, put that transmission out as well, because it will be the stone speaking in a sense.
Exactly. Like you could
Exactly.
also hit the stones with an iron hammer. I mean, like that you're saying they have.
They're not going to let her hit the stones. They arrest her.
I forgot about that. Oh no, but if you got a sample of the same type of stone, you could. Like one of the things I do when I ring, metal objects is I take really thin fishing line, drill a hole, and then hang it. So you could hang a stone and hang it from a beam, and then it's got to be really thin fishing line. I found cotton string doesn't work; it's too damp. If it's a really thin fishing line and you drill a hole with a drill, I mean, if you can drill through the stone, then you got a hole and you can hang it and then ring it, and then we'll know what that material sounds like.
Well, I'm going to step in here and mention that if you'd like to call and add a comment or ask a question of our guest, the call-in number is 917-889-8802. That's listed on the show page there. And we have about 6 minutes coming up to the break. And I still have a number of items we haven't got to that I spent a good bit of time, and I've been waiting for 3 weeks to talk about them. So I think this would be a good time to jump into there. Let's go to my item number 1. And to get there, you go to theothersideofmidnight.com, click on tonight's banner, and it takes you to the show page, and you'll see fast links to John. So my item number 1, first of all, the first recording I reviewed was from a guy named Paul, he's out in the Rocky Mountains, and he went out. He's not near a sacred site. He's in the mountains, and he went into the forest in the mountains to meditate, and he sent the message and recorded it. So I listened to that first, and what struck me was the amount of the background noise just is very reminiscent of a faint radio station that you can't pick up. It's just you can hear it in the background. And this, let's say if you're tuning in KISS 108 FM, but you're hearing maybe a radio station on either end of that frequency, like 108.01 or 0. So my question to myself is, is this background noise, it just sounds like a faint radio station, are we actually hearing the echoes of radio stations, or are we hearing the ether? These would be people's thoughts. This isn't people talking. So among this background noise, I also hear this, I think of it as whale song, just as doo, doo, and it's a rising tone, like I just made, and I didn't add it to my items as an audio clip, but I next went to Ralph's recording. Ralph went to the Balanced Rock in New York, and he sent the signal and then recorded. I guess he was sleeping during this. So I wondered if I would hear any kind of whale song on Ralph's recording, and sure enough, like a minute, it's 37 seconds in, I hear this. This time it's descending. It's a boo, boo kind of noise. And so, Keith, you have access to my items there. Can you play that Warm Moon Whale audio clip for us on my item number 2? Yeah, so you can hear that whine, and I have whales on the brain because, A, they're millions of years older than humans. They've been evolving for far longer. Whales have developed brains that are much more sophisticated than ours, not to mention they're the size of a Volkswagen, but Whales never sleep. Whales and dolphins, cetaceans never sleep. They can't, or they will drown. So they've developed a way to, at will, they can shut off half the side of their brain and let that side sleep, and the other side stays awake. And just, if they start falling asleep, they wake up. So it's a life-saving technique that they evolved, and so their brains are going to hear things that we don't even understand or don't hear or recognize as anything. They're just way beyond us. So that's why I'm always have the whales in the back of my mind, like the movie Star Trek IV, where the alien sends the message. And so to think these sounds could be meant just for humans, it's probably a bit ignorant. And so when I hear these sounds, that's what I think of as the whales. So in my item number 3, this image reminded me, this is from, is this Ralph? No, this is from, I believe this is Maria's. And these bands remind me of the murals in the Utah Swell at Arches National Park, which you can see in item number 4. I'm starting to recognize, after studying hundreds of these murals all over Canyonlands and Arches Park, and I noticed patterns and similarities, and these are very old, so they're very worn, of course. And yet you still see things in here.
We're headed to break here.
Oh, it's break time already. You're listening to The Other Side of Midnight with Richard C. Hoagland. My name is Jonathan Womack. We'll be back after this short break. Welcome back to The Other Side of Midnight. This is the final half hour. The time does fly. And we're going through my items. Let's see, we left off at item number 4. And items 5, 6, and 7, 5 and 6, they're the more mural images that you can look at there. And number 8 is a waveform of this bizarre male whisper. That this is on Ralph's. We're still on Ralph's recording at the Balanced Rock in New York on the equinox. So this is around the same time Maria is in Stonehenge. We have Ralph in New York doing his recording. So when I heard this, and the other items through 11, just additional waveforms. I'm zooming in on this whisper and this kind of thing. So we get to item number 12. And Keith, would you go ahead and play the audio clip for item 12, 12A?
And 9, and 9, and 9. And 9.
Yeah, that is very bizarre. So
did that say goodbye?
I don't know what he's saying, but again, I was thinking about, are we hearing this from 3D space, or is this, we're hearing thoughts out of the Schumann resonance? So I messaged Ralph and I said, Ralph, were you talking during this, or what was going on? Because I got this male voice. So he listens to it. Well, first he says, no, I was sleeping during this. I said it and then set and forget and took a nap. And then when he listened to it, he says, that sounds like me, but again, I was sleeping. So I'm wondering if this is Ralph in his dream. We're hearing him talk in his sleep. I don't know, but it's certainly very bizarre. So now we go to item 13, where this is Maria's recording now. The rest of my items are Maria's recording. And I call it seeing things because after a while, I start seeing things in this yellow-orange area as if these colors were embossed, and I start seeing patterns and figures, like maybe bust of people or this kind of thing. And so it made me think of number 14. We're at Arches National Park, and this area, it's next to Park Avenue. If you want to go on Google Earth and look at this area, I call it Grand Gallery. It has no name. It's just my name for it. But it's just incredible murals all through this Grand Gallery area. And you can see there, you start seeing angels and Anunnaki, and wow, it just starts popping out after a while. You look at this stuff long enough and you think, my God, these are beautiful murals. We need to preserve these and enhance them so that we can see them in all their glory. So number 15, I'm going to skip through some of these because if you're not wearing headphones, you're not really going to hear these sounds if we just play them back over the radio. But you're free to play them for yourself and listen. Number 16, I think you can hear that one pretty well. Keith, if you want to go ahead and play number 16A. So it's very faint, but you can hear it, and we can always isolate that further to bring it out more if need be. Number 17, we don't need to play that. That's just, as I was talking about, this background noise, it sounds like an FM station that's just too far away. You can't quite pull it in, but you can hear it. And number 18, I don't even know what that is, if that's a noise that Ralph was. Oh, no, this is Maria's recording. I don't know what that sound is at all. I guess you could play that one, Keith, 18A. It's. Yeah, that's certainly like no other sound we've heard, but I don't know if that's just somebody moving or what that is, but for what it's worth, it's there. And number 19, I'd like to go back and do this sound again and clean it up and just pick out the sound and skip all the other frequencies that are around it so you can hear it better. So maybe we'll come back to that on another show, because it sounded to me almost like it's a woman saying Ela, but then I thought, isn't Richard's dog that has passed away a couple of years ago, I guess that was, his dog's name is sounds very much like that. I'm trying to blank right now what the dog's name, but it's Sela or something like that, and I didn't have a chance to ask Richard, but that caught my attention. And Number 20, it sounds like a woman's voice saying robber. And again, I'd like to go back and do some of these sounds where I eliminate the other frequencies and just zero in on the robber sound so we can hear it better. Number 21 through 24, these are amplitude waveforms. I noticed I'm looking for patterns, and in number 21, you see this is Paul, who was meditating in the woods. There's no sacred sites nearby, just him meditating. And then in item 23 on Ralph's recording, you can see in number 21, the highest peak there when you're looking right to left and you have this rise and fall, the highest peak there, it's kind of like a mountain. There's two peaks that make up this little mountain here. And when you look at number 23, you see that same mountain in that waveform, just kind of halfway through, looking right to left. You see that same mountain with the two peaks, and I thought that was interesting. And then in number 24, you have Maria's recording, which, it's just off the scale. It's just the amplitude is so high because Stonehenge amplifies everything. And in number 25, this is a look at Maria's 1 hour and 20 minutes of recording. And this is the Hertz waveform. And you see these sweeps, the bright yellow spots in there. They descend, and some are rising. And in 25A, that's a pitch curve, so you can see it a bit more clear where the pitches are changing. And these curves are also where we're hearing some of these tones that Thomas was playing earlier. And 25B, I've zoomed in a bit on these curves so you can see them a little better. And of course, the Indian singing bowl. And I call it arpeggio close-up because you can play a chord a couple different ways. You can, like on a guitar, you can just strum it one quick stroke and it's just a ring. The arpeggio is when you stroke the chord in steps like you stretch it out, and it just reminds me of an arpeggio chord. And so I took some images of I just Googled sheet music, and these are three of the first ones that came up. And in 25D, you can see where I put them up against the Hertz waveform from Maria's 1 hour and 20 minute recording, and just similarities there. And then I happened to go, I did this analysis a couple of weeks ago, and just by coincidence, I took a break, and I go on YouTube to watch something, and on my feed is Steve Vai, Teeth of the Hydra. It had just come out the day before. And Steve Vai is one of the most talented musicians on the planet. He's a master entertainer, performer, composer, guitarist. And he teamed up with Ibanez to create this insane instrument. It's all kinds of guitars and other electronic applications in there that he can play with the sound. And it's hard to even describe. I encourage everyone to go on YouTube and watch this video. It is beautiful and astounding and amazing. And I think he's taken us to another level where other people are going to follow in his footsteps and take this to other levels where instead of just playing a guitar, we have these other instruments for interpreting and creating different kinds of music. So I just love that Teeth of the Hydra. Now, number 26, this is where we get into really get into Maria's stuff here like Thomas was. This is, we can skip over this because Thomas already played this, 1 minute, 18 seconds. And you can see the pitch curve there of what we were listening to before. And number 27, that's 6 minutes and 58 seconds in. I label it narrow because I use a tool to just go in and grab, if you click on that image, you can see where I can just highlight a section and then play that back, and you don't hear all these other frequencies. So it allows you to hear these tones much better. And so, Keith, if you can play number 27 there, we've already heard this with Thomas, but we're going to hear it without all of the other frequencies around it, so it's worth playing again. And that's it. Yeah, just these quick tones that come in where I'm hearing the rock is ringing, the rock is resonating from these receptions. So in 27A, I've added some graphics here where I've just outlined on the left side, there's like a white square. And this white square, you can see that the orange and yellow is faded. And when you're listening to it, the static gets quieter. And then all of a sudden, for some reason, it gets back loud again. And then over on the right side, I have these black rectangular squares drawn over. These are tones that are steady. They're steady tones that are being played through Maria's recording. And they're mostly covered up by the static, but you can hear them and you can signal them out. But they're steady tones. So in addition to these sweeps, these descending and ascending tones, you have in the background these steady tones that are just going beep through the whole thing. And yes, they're quiet and everything, but they are there. And let's see, let's go to the next one is number 28. That was the bird whistle. Tom had played this before. And let's see, did I do a narrow? Let's see. No, I did not. All right, let's move along. And number 29. This one's a bit hard to hear. When I'm going through it, I hear them pretty clearly, but then when you record them, you just play them back over the radio or the internet, it's not as discernible. So I encourage everyone to have headphones. But this sound just reminded me of hydraulics, because you hear this change in tone, like almost like you have this mechanical hydraulic machine. So could you, Keith, if you could play number 29, let's see what that sounds like. Go ahead and play that one more time. So yeah, I think you can hear that fairly clear. Now, number 30 was interesting because we're getting the most interesting data came toward the end of this recording. And if you click on the image, you can see that we are at the playhead's at 1 hour and 3 minutes. And you have this loud static, bright yellow, and you have the random bongo drum or whatever that sound is. I've called it a coconut before, like if you took a spoon and banged on the side of a coconut or a watermelon or something like that. And it's just a random boop, 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 boop. But then there's this burst of static, and all of a sudden, the drum starts a steady beat. It's not random anymore, and there's something significant there going on. I'm not sure what it is, but Keith, could you play number 30? Okay, and number 31, the buzzing, can you play that for us, please? And number 32 are some harmonics. Can you play that one, Keith, please? And number 33, harmonic. I call it harmonic coconut because, as Thomas and I mentioned before, the harmonics are affecting the other tones surrounding it. So, Keith, can you play number 33? I think that's the one, Tom, and she said sounded kind of like a cat to you. I like number 34 because you can hear the waver of the tone in this one where it goes. So it's faint, but you can hear it, Keith. So you might have to play it a couple of times. But go ahead. Great. And in 34A, if you click on that image, this is interesting because you can see these blue lines which represent changes in pitch. They're happening most at the 432 hertz. It says A4. If you look on the right side where you have these, the notes, the tones are listed as notes. A4, that's 440 hertz. We're sending out a signal at 432, and then we're getting back these pitch changes at 432. So I just found that curious and wondered if that has any significance. Like, is that the blue stones are singing the most, or what stones are singing the most during this recording was what I was wondering. And 35, we've heard Thomas already played. This was, when I heard this was the most interesting sound from the recording. Go ahead and play it again, Keith, if you would, number 35, the passing train. And number 36, we already heard from Thomas. I had called this the empty toner. And we have a few minutes, so who wants to, do you folks have anything you want to add after hearing my items?
Yeah, the one that you featured, which it was like a buzzing. It was a buzzing noise.
Yes.
I heard that one too. The interest. I think you called it like the bees or something.
They could go buzzing.
Yeah, like the interesting thing that I found about that is that the cadence, like the rhythm of that, almost sounded conversational. It was like
I thought it was a voice.
I thought it was a voice as well, that it was like trying to pierce through, but it was just kind of static. But the cadence, like the rhythm of it was it came across as conversational. I didn't highlight it for whatever reason, but I do remember hearing that when I listened through the whole thing.
Yeah.
So I just wanted to point that out, that pardon me, that was a good, was definitely a good catch. And it definitely seems as though we've sort of kind of both identified. I think it's really important for people to understand that we all analyze this completely independently. So, I mean, this is the first time that I'm hearing what Jonathan has kind of pointed out, and vice versa. So it's kind of interesting to sort of see that there's an overlap, that we're both actually identifying kind of the same sort of oddities in the recordings.
All right, Maria, would you like to pitch in on where do you think we should go next?
Well, Richard at one point did mention Silbury Hill, which is the largest man-made mound in Europe for a transmission. I don't know if Richard's still thinking of that.
Yeah, that would be cool. David, what do you think would be do you have an opinion on where we should go next?
Well, even though I like to see the transmission inside the Great Pyramid, Silbury Hill seems like an amazing idea, actually.
One thing that I would like to sort of bring up, and this is something that we've been kind of talking about over the last little bit, and this is where I think Ralph could really kind of come in, and the same thing with you, Jonathan. But I think that maybe this next experiment being a little bit closer to your home, Maria, where we can kind of work around schedules a little bit more, like really try to coordinate so that, David's able to be listening from his radios, that we're all kind of really doing this super, super coordinated. But I think what would be really interesting is that, collectively, the people that are a part of the experiment and anybody else that's listening that would want to kind of sort of join in, but really to kind of put like some type of like a more kind of astral intention kind of going out there. And I know, Maria, you, because of your Druid background, had mentioned that, when you were going into Stonehenge, that you were kind of going in certain sort of, kind of special ways. Maybe you can kind of talk about that. But I think it'd be interesting for us to kind of expand outwards from just a purely kind of super, as scientific as we're trying to sort of make this, to really kind of put in a little bit more of like an ethereal kind of intention before this, the experiment that you can maybe do next week, sort of in and around your area in the Aubrey Hills, was it?
I have to cut you off there, Thomas, because our time has run out. So we'll pick this up another show, and I'm sure Richard will be back. And I want to thank our listeners tonight for joining us. If there's anybody out there that could go to Arches Park and Delicate Arch, and if we provide you with a radio and you'd be willing to send the signal into the arch and then record whatever comes back, I think that would be very cool if we could make that happen. So until then, thank you, Maria, David, and Thomas. My name is Jonathan Womack. Thank you for joining us. We'll see you next time here on theothersideofmidnight.com.